What's happening, guys? We're back. So this one's going to be a little bit about aquatic plant nutrients, how we plan to sustain something as of right now. So basically, in terms of plants and water, you're mostly going to want things that can pretty much live on mostly nitrogen. I have done a nutrient video, so if you haven't seen that, go ahead and stop, check that out. This one's mostly going to be about aquatic plant nutrients. We are looking into getting a self-sustaining catfish pond. It would be very, very useful here on this homestead. So I guess we'll just go ahead and jump in for this one. Starting off, when you're keeping fish, everyone knows there's a stocking density. So basically, your water can have X amount of nutrients before it begins to negatively impact the health of the fish. The higher the stocking density, so aka more fish per gallon or per a container of your choosing, you're going to have to either A, do a whole lot of water changes at a certain point, or X amount of water changes at a certain point, depending on the stocking density, or you're going to have some way of cleaning and scrubbing that system, whether it be via an aquaponics solution or just some sort of flood and drain thing. Some farms kind of cycle it through. They do have, like I said, filters, but you still end up having to do a water change if you're going to be doing an aquaculture, which is just going to be different fish. So for us, we actually are going to have a multi-step system, and as always, we're going to have natural feeds available based off of the excrements of the animals. So in this case, it would be fish that'll feed the animals, and we'll still give them, their grain option or their floating feed option, but we want them to kind of survive on their own. It's taking a little bit out of what I have in my tanks here inside, and expanding on that idea. So catfish are omnivores, as you know. They need high protein, which at the end of the day, protein, it's easy to get from meat. It's very easy. And catfish are also some of the best converters. So for every pound of feed, you're on average going to get like a pound of flesh. Give or take, numbers vary. Everyone's different. Just so you guys kind of have like a little bit of something to work on. So that's why we chose catfish. And also, we live in Texas. At the end of the day, catfish are more prolific here than other species that only breed during cooler climates. So we do have a water heater. We will be doing breeding during the off season and grow outs during the warm season, because it's easier for us here to keep them cool than it is keep them warm per $1 that we have to pay per pound. So we're going to have actually multiple systems. I'm going to be following our outdoor design that we have now as well. We're going to have feeder guppies and river snails in 2 barrels, the ones we have now, and just let them go. Pretty much just let them breed and breed and breed and breed and breed. We are going to have some duckweed on top, and some other vegetation that they can eat on. They're mostly algae eaters. We don't really have to feed them, take care of them. They do their own thing, as long as they have enough sunlight on those barrels, which is perfect for us, because that's going to create our protein source. It's all the calcium, the protein that they need. Now, as I had stated, catfish are omnivores, so we will be running a little bit of an aquaponics system. I'm still debating. I really want to do a mixture of a raft system with some sort of, not bedding, but where you take I don't know the terminology just offhand, but you actually take a PVC pipe and you put it at about a 1% tilt. And what that means is, I think it goes a 1/4 inch down every foot or something like that. I could be wrong, but it's like 1%. It's just enough for water to move. Not very fast, but move. So we do have a water pump. I'm working on getting all and I do believe it's an inline water pump. So anywho, the pump will actually push through that system, and the PVC will be holding a number of different edible plants specifically for the fish. We already have our own garden and a greenhouse, so for us it's not really anything crazy, but it's going to allow us to have a higher stocking density. 1, because we're filtering the water through a number of means, and 2, it'll be live. There will be some live food. So even though we will be adding pellets and stuff, they're really not going to need them as much. We'll still follow traditional rules, and you know, their health is obviously our number one priority since it will be a food source later on. Um, but in terms of sustainability, it's definitely going to be there. Um, the air pump that I have, I'm actually going to just run our excess lines. We have right now 3 extra lines that I can run, so we'll be running all 3 of those lines to the aquaponics, which will allow us to increase our stocking density. They need more airflow and cleaner water when it gets hotter, and they also eat more when it gets hotter. Um, in terms of stocking density, again, we want to have a higher stocking density than what that system that I'm talking about can actually handle. Um, and there's a couple of reasons for this, but just getting started, when you have too high of a stocking density, as I stated, you're going to have to ultimately do some water changes. So we're going to actually have a float valve starting out, and it'll regulate the water, you know, height, and then we'll also have the pump with the ability during, you know, it'll all be done off timers, and we'll show you all that stuff and post a video when that happens. But it will actually run. We'll calculate how many gallons we need to push out, and that will be what we do essentially. Some of it will go on the garden, some of it will go in the yard, and if it doesn't go in this yard or that yard, it'll go in that yard or that yard and garden beds up there, the flowering garden beds. It will ultimately get used. Um, if that doesn't work, I'll pump it down. We're actually going to be getting ducks soon. We're working on that, so whenever I do, we'll get a kiddie pool or something to and I'll just run some of the extra water into that duck pond since it should be pretty much okay for them. If we do that, obviously I'll have it hit a filter system and a number of plants before it goes to the duck pond. But I mean, it's just plants, so you know we can easily, especially with the nursery, um, obtain stuff like that. Especially just some heavy feeders to really scrub that water clean, and maybe even some polyfill in certain intervals to make sure the ducks and chickens are getting really clean water. Um, and if I need to, I can also have it hit, because of our heat here, certain areas where it gets in, the water line goes into sunlight, heats up the mixture to kill off any bacteria and stuff, and then goes into a spot to cool down before it dumps into the pool um, back there. Um, so like we'll be able to, with that design in theory, although this is in theory, um, you know, we still have to do a practical use for it. This would be a base design, a little cog in our homestead machine. Um, because ultimately I could take something like this and expand on a water reservoir without fish and put, but still have it connected, and you know, we could collect rainwater, and mixing something like that with a gray water system, but keeping a gray water system separate. We could put that on fruit trees, and we would really be able to save actually a lot of water. The other reason that I want to dump have a high enough stocking density, sorry, to push some of the aquatic water onto our garden or our yard, sorry, is because we really need to grow some grass. After all of this gets stabilized, our very last animal that we want to look into is going to be goats. It's going to be our final meat source. And obviously, as always, we want to integrate standard feeding practices before we add any sort of feed or food. And again, they will have automated feeders. They will have more than their fair share of that. But naturally, they're going to go for something that tastes better. And we have plenty of Johnson grass and different hay-like grasses here that they would like. We're also going to be looking into different. I found something called tree hay and bush hay. It's basically a tree or a bush that contains their leaves all year, but whenever it's winter, but you know, before all the leaves drop, it holds on to these essentially dead leaves, so to speak, these dried leaves. Um, that's supposed to be really helpful with goats. So we will be using something like that, see how they do. And again, we will have a normal hay source and things for them outside of that, but I definitely still want to try the bushel method and see if we can produce something like that. Um, we have a number of different things we're looking into adding. We're also We also have mesquite trees already. So we're trying to divvy up basically everything's purpose. Um, Originally, we were looking into, like I said, the gray water source. We only wanted it for fruit trees, but now we're looking into possibly using it for things such as mesquite wood. So we'll also have firewood and different things, whether we're running a kiln, making carbon, whatever we choose to do later on. It'll really open up our possibilities. But back to the aquatic plant nutrients. As I stated in the nutrient video, fish's urine and poop essentially is a nutrient source. It's very high in what we would refer to as nitrogen, but it's really it's it's waste. Bacteria can it generally has to be done through a biological filter, but not always. Um, but anyways, the first set of bacteria will produce either nitrites or nitrates. I'm probably going to get them backwards. But they go from nitrites to nitrates after that, once bacteria hits it again, a different set of bacteria. And essentially, it's a nitrogen source the plants can readily use. That's why during during a drought around lakes, rivers, streams, life is flourishing, is because that water is essentially wicking with all those nutrients into that soil. So in the riverbeds. So using something like that in terms of plants, as I had stated, we may use tomato plants at the very beginning to just be heavy scrubbers. Heavy fruit-bearing plants don't do as well, but it just depends on what part of the system we're going to be pushing plants. So if I was to put something and head it down towards the ducks back there and chickens, I'm naturally going to put a ton of plants to clean that water out, and possibly even a heat source to burn off any possible salmonella cases or anything. In terms of what we're going to be using for the fish, it's mostly going to be leafy greens. Now, just so you guys know, I believe it is iceberg lettuce, and I'll have to double check before the next video we post on it. So definitely check that out when it gets posted to make sure. But I believe fish cannot have, or catfish cannot have iceberg lettuce. Something, I think some sort of chemical in it upsets their stomach or something like that, and can harm them. There are different types of lettuces that they can use, so we'll naturally be growing some of those. Maybe I'm also looking into other things, like maybe some cucumbers. Cucumbers are generally pretty healthy for them, and possibly even a watermelon. Things mostly like vines and leafy greens. That way, if they have deficiency, it's no big of a deal. If they don't produce any fruit, it's no big of a deal. We can still feed the plant to the actual catfish themselves. And pretty much we're just going to kind of keep these loops happening, in our homestead machine. We're going to have to start calling it the homestead machine. So in terms of aquatics, we're also going to be looking into possibly putting some smaller feeder fish in the kiddie pond back there for the ducks and chickens. And whenever we do that, there's a couple places that we want to run it to. One of it, we actually want to run to a something of a garden for the chickens. So we give them supplemental feed, but it's not as stable as some of my other systems to where it automatically just happens. So since we're not using timeout corner anymore, I'm actually going to be looking into possibly turning that into a temporary garden to where we actually plant it just vigorously with plants and run the water from the duck pond to the plants, and have a float valve on the pond. And again, it's pretty much automated. And then maybe once a month or once every week or so, we'll figure out our time frames and see how long it takes for plants to recover, this, that, and the other, and what parts of the plants the chickens tend to prefer. So that way we can grow those out. And that way we can just open the gate, let them go eat, let them graze. They'll have their feed, and it'll be a little bit more sustainable for where they're at. With our flock size, it is getting a little bit larger, so we are going to be definitely reliant on this aquatic nutrient source a little bit more than I was prepared for originally, just because it's free nutrients, so to speak. Yes, we will have to, another animal to take care of, but with our automated systems, we don't really spend much time with them, and they're very, very healthy animals. Even our chickens have an automated dust bath that I just fill up every now and again. They don't poop in it or anything. They're actually pretty good about it. Um, so we'll mostly have to see. But we do have a worm bin. So for those of you wondering what would happen with all of the film and filth that would develop at the bottom, we would basically run a siphon with a pull vacuum. So that way it's pulling water, but we don't need an actual pump to accidentally suck up any fish or anything. We can put it into another bucket and make sure we didn't get any fish in there. But you just kind of suck that up, and then that's actually what we'll be feeding into our worm bin, which the worms will help feed the chickens, the dogs, and the fish. Because we have the red wiggler composting worms out back. And they're also taking off pretty well, so they're in the chicken coop. If you haven't seen that, go check our homestead updates. It'll be in there. And pretty much it'll self-sustain itself a little bit more. Right now, we have some open ends with those two systems, so that's why we're looking into the catfish design to kind of help close that loop. So that's going to be pretty much it for aquatic nutrients, plant nutrients, and what we're planning to do with it. Aquatic life is very, very useful if used appropriately. Some people, if you're looking into doing an aquatic, an aquaponics setup for heavy feeders, there is an opportunity you can use that I've experimented with, and it's what's called a dual root zone. What that is it's basically, think of it like a smart pot or a fabric pot sitting on top of a closed water bin. So the plant, it grows in there, and then it grows out through the netting. There's a million different designs out there. Again, always do your research. But ultimately, for a heavy feeder in a nitrogen setting, you can run the aquaponic water through that water reservoir on the bottom. And then whenever it's fruiting, run either just a water or a hydroponic solution for flowering through, or fruit production through that water reservoir. Which means in the end, for a system like that, there would still be a period of time where you're actually pushing nutrients somewhere else. So you need to make sure that that need is met, because your aquaponics needs to continue to run. So that's pretty much it. Like I said, be kind out there. Have a great day. Be nice. Don't forget to like, subscribe, drop a comment. Any questions you got? I love debating it with you guys. Have a good one.